Well, I wasn't trying to drink myself to death until recently, but I was drinking, and every time I drank, I got really depressed, and I felt like I wanted to die all the time. So self-harming, I'd be burning myself in the garage with cigarettes to punish myself, and it was really horrible, and it was very tormenting.
And I think, and I'm going to speak for me personally, my attitude was my downfall. And so it's about that making that decision that sometimes our best thinking in our minds are where the battlefield is. I spent most of my life performing and trying to prove myself, right? And so even from a young girl, I was able to be an international athlete. I was able to go over and play basketball in England. I was given a scholarship to the United States to play basketball and various things. I always had to be the very best at everything I was doing and had to have high marks and always had to be kind of number one. And if I wasn't number one, I was kind of a dilapidated mess on the floor, and I didn't feel I had value or I had worth. And so I had 3 young kids. I was actually doing my master's degree here in Calgary, and things were going well, and it seemed along those lines of success, I would often sabotage myself just before moments of great success. There's anything you could really call it, as I was just falling apart, and the paper mache masks were all crumbling, and I just thought, I can't make it one more day inside my own skin. And so I kind of Googled help. And I was kind of reaching for any straws that I could, and I ended up going to Florida to a treatment center.
You didn't even realize you were thinking so negatively, and when you started to change your thoughts to positive, even if
there's depression, self-worthlessness, that's probably the biggest one. That's probably what, even if girls come in with addictions like alcoholism or drugs, it almost seems like that's sort of the byproduct of really the worthlessness.
I couldn't stop drinking. I was going to get up, and I knew there was a razor blade in the medicine cabinet, and I was going to go and get it.
Just with everything that's happened in my life, I was just done.
Well, for me, it goes way, way back. Life was going along pretty good till the age of 7. And then there was this man who was in his 50s, and I lived on a farm in Manitoba, and he came and he would always deliver fuel. And so the thing that I would always do with him, I constantly had my baseball mitt on and a baseball. And he'd be standing on top of the tanks, and my dad would be out there talking with him, and he'd be filling the farm fuel tanks. And I'd be throwing my baseball to him, and I just loved it. I waited for him to come. And then the day came when my dad was on the field and said to me in the morning, can you go tell him where I want that barrel of oil put? And it was in the shed. And that was the beginning of a different kind of life for me. I ran back into the house, and I told my sister, who was about 22 months older than me, and she just made one statement. She said, if you tell Dad, don't tell Dad because he'll kill him. And so I never talked about it again till I was pregnant with my first son. I think I began sort of a wrong perception that day of my ability to say no, because I was 7 and he was in his 50s, and I didn't feel comfortable to say no. And then for me, I guess I'd have to be honest and say the one thing that is still remaining with me from that incident is the fact that I'm very claustrophobic, because the harder that I fought to get away, the harder he hung on. And it was just this feeling of, like, when you're a small child like that, you just want to run, right? You just want to run for safety. And I couldn't. And that claustrophobic feeling of being held there against my will. And then equating what men want from a woman was a very bad start for my thought process in those areas. And I never, at that point in my life, I was a naive little farm girl, had any kind of exposure to things of a sexual nature. And that was a first beginning. By the time I was 14, I wanted to commit suicide. And I came home from a youth event one night, and my mom knew I was very upset, and so she came walking into the bathroom with me, and she just said, "What is wrong?" And I just said, "I just want to kill myself. I just don't want to live." And she just said, "I don't ever want to hear that out of your mouth again." So I didn't feel free. She just kind of shut me down, and I didn't feel free to say how I felt.
Well, I think it started, for me, I was bullied quite a bit in school, so my way of excelling was to excel academically and read, and my goal was to go to university. I went on full scholarship, top-notch grades, and then when I graduated, I wanted to work for Walt Disney World, and they were hiring 5 people across Canada, so I researched in order to get that job, and I did get one of 5 positions with Walt Disney World. In my careers, I've always, again, excelled. I left a 10-year relationship and literally dove into running. So I went from just running casually 10K runs to running half marathons, to running marathons, to running Boston, to qualifying for New York, to doing triathlons, to doing Ironman Canada. So you can see how it was all the overachieving. And Kim once read, there was a lot of different segments to this article. One that stood out was the overachiever, that they eventually just burn themselves out. And that's the stage I was at. I was burnt out, and alcohol was just a way to withdraw. So I ended up in the hospital in emergency. I ended up there a lot. And I had been 7 days in the hospital, and my parents didn't know what to do with me, and I definitely wasn't ready. Had I gone home after the 7 days in the hospital, I wouldn't be here. I truly know I would not be alive today. I had completely given up, like completely. And as you heard, my mission was to drink myself to death. And then if we jump back, really 8 months, that's all I wanted, was to die. And so I did go to treatment. This is kind of my 5th time, but I tell Kim I don't like to call it treatment, because it's really not what I've experienced before. And so I had gone to a treatment center I'd been to before, and I came out of there, and I thought I had it, but within 2 weeks I relapsed. And when I look at it now, and even what I journaled about, I felt overwhelmed. And I had gone to the mountains that day to go cross-country skiing, and I skied 18 kilometers, our first outing out. Again, there's that personality. But I really went that day not to enjoy and be with nature. I went there to escape that day and came home and relapsed. It's interesting, growing up, I was always the parent from when I was 8 years old. My mom she was going through menopause, and she was also going through postpartum depression, and so I became a parent really early on. And when my addiction to alcohol had gotten me, I couldn't be that responsible one. I couldn't do the things I had, and my mom took charge and took a parental role. But what was ironic was when I left here to get my car and go home for that first weekend, my mom slipped right back into the child role and was waiting for me to be the parent, but I was aware of it. I was kind of a little dumbfounded, but I had never made all those connections before, and that's what I'm learning. And just even when the other ladies were talking, being vulnerable, like when I came here, I thought, courage was being a warrior and fighting everything, and now I realize courage is vulnerability.
If I go back to the biological father, that was actually really nasty. He was, they diagnosed him actually mentally ill. He did a lot of cruel things to my mother that, my brothers and I watched. And so we kind of did a midnight run on him and got away and met my father now. He's wonderful. But so I have a space of growing up with a biological was really nasty, but then we met this wonderful man, and my mom married him, and that was all good until I, grew up into my own life, and that's where my decisions were bad. I think I was just always trying to take the easy way out, the quick way out. I ended up pregnant at 19, a single mom at 20. So from there, I didn't have any friends that were pregnant and no babies, so I kind of ended up lonely. So I made a lot of bad decisions there. don't know, things just never ever worked out for me in life. I just felt basically used, abused, and I started to really despise society, people. And with that, we turn around and give back what we're getting, which was wrong because it just caused more disaster for myself and made me feel worse about myself. I've been controlled most of my life, told how to think. Basically, all my decisions were wrong. It wasn't if, it was when I was gonna finish myself. I had a lot of anger, lots of anger. So I raised my voice a lot, I swore a lot, and I aimed it pretty much, sorry. I aimed it pretty much all at Kim. So coming here was basically learning to grow up and think my age and get to know Jesus. I have a lot of peace. I don't have the chaos anymore. I have a lot of joy in just watching the growth. You know, it's awesome. See some light come into their eyes and some color into their face, and
I'm back on that narrow road and not trying to take the easy road. And you know, that joy, and then that joy was described to me as Jesus, others, and then you. And honestly, I had the others part, just the O in the joy. I never had the J or the Y because I was just people pleasing.
Just like all of that. The girls peeking in, making hearts as they walk out. And yeah, yesterday, in fact, one of the gals that we transitioned out was working at her job, and I went through her grocery line, and as I'm walking out, I just hear behind me, "I love you." Yeah, it's worth it all, right? Anything you go through with them is worth it then. I just think it's fascinating and just so rewarding to see that you can tell them, "Who do you think you are?" And they'll give you this terrible picture of themselves. And you can say, "Well, would you like to know what I see? This is who I see sitting here." And in the end, when they leave, that's who leaves, you know? That's awesome. That's just so exciting.
You know, 2 weeks ago, some of these ladies were drinking themselves to death in hotel rooms. Or you pick people up that are covered in blood that have been cutting themselves, and here they're smiling today and on the phone with you with their children. And those are the real stories that, and there's stories that don't work out, you know, because the world we live in, but those are the ones that keep you on the narrow road and keep you, I guess, focused, and because it's not an easy job, right? And you're kind of on 24/7. And when we leave, we don't leave these girls, right? You know, we're always there. The phones are always on. We get calls sometimes in the middle of the night from girls who are in crack houses that have left and want to come back. But I said, you know what you need to do? Are you ready to surrender? And they're kind of like, well, almost. I said, well, when you're ready, my husband and I will come and get you night or day. But you have to be ready. And so, yeah, that's what makes us tick here.